The following is a Mad Owl presentation.
And now, Galactic Blue presents the closing tag. Here is your host, Raul Smith.
Hello, one and all, those near and far. From Salt Lake to San Antonio, Paris to Kiev. I think I'm pronouncing that right, I hope. Welcome to another edition of the closing tag. I'm Raul Smith. I am the president, CEO, co-founder, and lead developer for Galactic Blue, and I, for one, welcome Terry Stotts as a consultant for the Utah Jazz. Yeah, I said it. I welcome everybody to the podcast. We are on most of the major platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and so many others. And our video podcasts can be found on our dedicated Facebook and YouTube pages. Links can be found in both the description of this podcast, as well as on theclosingtag.com. This is all provided to you free of charge, thanks to our amazing sponsor, which is, of course, Galactic Blue, your professional web development, graphic design, and logo design resource. Visit galacticblue.net for more information on how your business can benefit from our services. After a bit of a lull in the last episode, we're pretty much back in the swing of things in this episode, and there's no better example of this than our supersized tech news segment, starting right about now.
Here is some tech news.
In a show that it's all about the money with Netflix, just weeks after announcing their latest price hike, Netflix announced that it's looking to crack down on the widespread practice of password sharing between people who don't live in the same household. Netflix is looking to create a new tier system that will make it so that you will have to pay more to share on more than two screens. Now, this is not the first time that Netflix has tried this. They are looking to not only expand their current catalog, but also create more original content such as Stranger Things and The Witcher. Wow. This is going to be a very interesting development to keep an eye on going forward. Now, if you read a headline that reads, AMC Invests in Mining, you would immediately think they're getting into Bitcoin or Ethereum, correct? Right? Wrong. AMC Theaters is actually investing in actual mining, like mining gold and silver. Shareholders and analysts were so stunned by the move that one analyst called it, and I quote, a complete misuse of shareholder capital, end quote. Hycroft Mining Holding Corporation, which is named after Hycroft Mine in Nevada, is sitting on some 15 million ounces of gold deposits and some 600 million ounces of silver deposit, according to the press release from AMC Theaters themselves, so take that how you want. Then there's Michael Pachter of Wedbush Securities, calling the move, in his words, idiotic. It's embarrassingly stupid. By that, I don't mean investing in gold mining is embarrassingly stupid. I mean it's inappropriate for a movie theater company to step so far out of their core business and into some completely unrelated business that will not drive any traffic to their theaters. It's a complete misuse of shareholder capital, and it's not as if they're swimming in cash and they've got nothing better to do. They have debt. Pay down some debt. quote unquote. Now, dude out here is asking all the important questions. A couple questions. First, I have to echo Michael here. The fact that AMC Theaters, while still in a considerable amount of debt, most of which is coming off of COVID, would choose to invest in ore mining, then pay down their debt is absolutely baffling. AMC is a theater chain. What are they doing investing in gold? This is the sheer definition of lunacy. Now, there is a possibility that they could possibly see a huge return on investment in buying a share of Hycroft Mining, but there's an even bigger possibility that Hycroft is full of it and AMC just got played. Nobody knows right now. All anybody from AMC's side can do at this point is hope for the best. Also, it's important to note that AMC just months ago was on the very brink of bankruptcy because of the pandemic. So, there is that. It's a tale as old as time. Rich people buying boats. Goes as far back as the Christopher Columbus days, let's be honest. Now, many of them are trying to hide their money by buying boats. Not just from the IRS or the American government, but now from Vladimir Putin. The kind you only see in movies owned by megalomaniac, rich eccentric supervillains, those type of boats. Now, many of these rich Russian oligarchs are seeing their yachts seized by national and international authorities. France seized a yacht owned by Rosneft CEO Igor Sechin, and I know I'm butchering half these names. I know this right off the bat. I don't speak Russian, so yeah. Who is affectionately known in his inner circle as Darth Vader. After Sechin tried the dirty pool move by sailing his boat out of their jurisdiction, but they ended up catching him anyway. Spain seized a $140 million yacht owned by former KGB member Sergei Chemezov. And that's just two instances of boats being seized lately. There are reportedly even more that the European Union authorities have seized in the last several months. All I have to say is, to steal a line from a popular meme, good. Filing this news article under what took them so long to get to this point. The latest Android Auto app update adds a diagnostic feature that checks if your USB cable or port isn't working as expected. If your phone isn't connecting to your car, then the diagnostic tool might be able to help pinpoint and troubleshoot if the USB connection is where the issue is. As a full disclosure, I probably have no less than 5 USB cords laying around here. And if I had to venture a guess, half of them probably don't work. And the other half are probably too slow for fast charging. So all I gotta say is this is a good step in the right direction for USB port and cord management. Filing this news article under should have seen this coming. Lyft plans to add a temporary fuel surcharge to fares in the wake of drastic gas price hikes throughout the United States. Lyft spokesperson stated in a statement, quote, "We've been closely monitoring rising gas prices and their impact on our driver community. Driver earnings remain elevated compared to last year, but given the rapid rise in gas prices, we'll be asking riders to pay a temporary fuel surcharge, all of which will go to the drivers," end quote. Now, it's good that Lyft appears to be genuinely caring about the financial and emotional well-being of their drivers. And this recent hike in gas prices is definitely taking its toll on the financial and emotional well-being of, well, everyone. Meanwhile, Uber is also announcing its own surcharge depending on the driver's location. Their surcharge is currently unavailable, however, in New York City as well as Nevada, but hopes to have one in place as soon as possible. We're 2 years into the COVID era, with many parts of the world still effectively in lockdown. Meanwhile, scientists and doctors are trying to discover patterns and behaviors, things that those that have been dying from COVID have in common. An interesting study coming from the University of Chicago showed that one of the factors most consistently associated with the high risk of death from COVID-19 in the United States is the lack of internet access, be it broadband, dial-up, or cellular. The study authors estimated that for every additional 1% of residents in a country who have internet access, between 2.4 and 6 deaths per 100,000 people could have been prevented depending on the makeup of the region. The study states, and I quote, "We believe this finding suggests that more awareness is needed. Populations with limited internet access remain understudied and are often excluded in pandemic research," end quote. Vox has a fascinating article online, not Fox, Vox, Victor, VOX. I'm gladly going to attach a link to this article in the description of the pod episode, or you could always Google Vox, that's VOX, COVID Internet. Since we're filing news stories, this one should be filed under Life Imitating Art or Art Imitating Life. Either way. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has captured the admiration, respect, and hearts of the international community during the Russia-Ukraine war. But this isn't anything new for the young leader of the upstart country from Eastern Europe. Zelenskyy has a satirical show on Netflix in which he plays a teacher who goes on a rant about political corruption and then finds himself thrust into the position of power as president. Sound familiar? Well, the show has not been on Netflix since 2021 and hasn't had much luck getting on another premium service. Well, lately, Netflix has done a complete 180 and put the show back up on international Netflix. Additionally, Zelenskyy has been nominated for his efforts in the war for the Nobel Peace Prize. Something tells me if Ukraine pulls off the upset and staves off a Russia invasion, he'll have no trouble winning that award along with the hearts of the entire world. Now, most people listening to this podcast probably don't know who Matt Mullenweg is. Hell, up until I did the prep work for this podcast, I didn't even know who Matt Mullenweg is. Well, he is the CEO of a web company called Automattic. That's AUTOMATTIC. You see, because it has his name in it. Matt. Anyway. Automattic is the company that owns WordPress. Matt Mullenweg is a co-founder of WordPress, so that makes sense. He just got done doing an interview not long ago for the tech online magazine The Verge about the wonders of an open source internet. I challenge you and implore you to go seek this internet interview. He talks about how 43% of all websites currently online run on WordPress, which is a pretty impressive number. Also, I believe it. WordPress is an open source software anyone can download and use for free. That's part of the appeal. Also, part of the appeal is that you can use WordPress and you don't have to be like me and have like years and years and years of experience. You can just pop in, move things around, and you're good to go. But he also talked at length about Tumblr, the social media that was acquired from the wreckage of AOL, Yahoo, and Verizon. Again, I encourage everybody listening to this to go seek this interview out. You should be able to find it by Googling Verge Matt Mullenweg. That's Mullenweg. Microsoft has promised a major announcement for their Windows event on April 5th that they claim will change the future of hybrid work. Now, if you don't know, hybrid work is when you can work both in the office and remote. It's a new trend that kicked off at the start of 2021 and has just kind of built up from there. It's kind of been in response to people getting so used to working remote that they don't want to go full-time back into the office. Also, gas prices. Last year, CEO Satya Nadella wrote, and I quote, "Hybrid work represents the biggest shift to how we work in our generation, and it will require a new operating model spanning people, places, and processes," end quote. It'll be interesting to see what, if anything, we learn or see of the project codenamed Microsoft Mesh. Lastly, in developer news, Apple has announced that it will only accept app submissions that were made using Xcode 13. Apple wrote on their developers site, quote, "iOS, iPadOS, and watchOS apps submitted to the App Store must be built with Xcode 13, which includes the SDKs for iOS 15, iPadOS 15, and watchOS 8, end quote. Apps that were developed and submitted using older versions of Xcode will still be supported, but the change applies to new submissions after April 25th. The Telltale Heart is an award-winning film adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's short story, which takes a headfirst deep dive into the Sea of Madness, retelling a classic psychological thriller with a mind-bending, pulse-pounding, bloody, disgusting film. Starring award-winning actor Sonny Grimsley and directed by the brilliant McLean Lindquist. The Telltale Heart has won awards and made many appearances in many short film and independent film festivals, ranging from the Film Quest Film Festival in Provo, Utah, to being awarded Best Short Film at the Minefield Film Festival in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to most recently being awarded, are you ready for this? Best Overall Short, Best Horror Short, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Sound Design, and Best Special Makeup from the Indie Film Fest, to appearing in over 60 international film festivals, that's 60, throughout the world. Revisit the Edgar Allan Poe short story, as this film brings more than just a classic horror story to a new audience, but also discovers a creative way to explore the groundbreaking psychological thriller. The narrative is enhanced through an unprecedented use of sounds and light, and the characters blend a modern sensibility with anachronistic charm, as seen through an unsettling array of time and space, while a shifting setting disorients the unwitting audience. What is seen and what is heard leads a perplexed audience to ask, what is insanity and what truly constitutes reality? TelltaleMovie.com for more information on this brilliantly insane thriller.
Nobody cares about my white boy blues.
So, pulling the curtain back a little bit, while I'm doing my prep work for these podcast episodes, I usually have in front of me like a bullet point, a bullet list of what it is that I want to talk about in a headline type format. For this segment specifically, I had written down, and I quote, "Has the fear-based media gotten out of control?" And in giant, bold, italicized, underlined lettering in parentheses, I had the word yes. So, just so we can properly set the tone for this segment, as if the bumper music wasn't a dead enough giveaway here. Fair warning. This segment will contain bombs being thrown at both the left and the right, mostly the right. And this segment will make you uncomfortable. That's the idea. My goal with this podcast is to help people grow, be it professionally or personally. You can't grow if you're comfortable. I'm going to take 3 perfect examples of what I'm talking about and break down just how illogical each scenario is. Now, before I do that, I should preface what I'm about to say with a stern reminder that I am, by all accounts, progressively left. That means I don't buy into the right or moderate buying points. It also means that I hope to see our society one day become one that doesn't solely rely on corporate greed to survive. And in fact, in order to survive, I believe our species has to move past corporate greed, be it today, tomorrow, or in 10 years. At some point, our species can no longer rely on billionaires who will put grabbing more money for themselves over the welfare of the planet or its people. That said, let's get into the examples that I had lined up. First, perhaps the greatest example of using people's irrational fears against them, the right-wing narrative, perhaps best heard from pundits like Tucker Carlson, that if we accept any kind of left-wing program that helps poor people, that we are accepting socialism and communism into our country. First of all, let's get the one big logical flaw of this entire thing out of the way. The biggest one in this entire scenario. Much like the last episode, I'm going to say this point slowly and loudly so that you can understand me. Are you ready? Okay. Socialism and communism are not the same. Are we good? Do I need to repeat that again? Repeat it again? Okay. The old guy in the red hat was too busy heckling me like he was Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert at the State of the Union. Okay. Let's do this again. Rewind. Socialism and communism are not the same. Hopefully everybody is clear on that. While they both deal in the redistribution of wealth among a society's members, there is a very clear and very distinct difference. Socialism still suggests that people contribute to society in a meaningful way. Communism just takes everybody's money and distributes it regardless. Now, you're probably saying that sounds the same to you. Well, both did come from the fight for workers' rights, but socialism gives more to those that contribute more to society. Sound familiar? Under a communist rule, you would not be able to own property. So your houses, your boats, your cars, your guns, all other personal property, this bowl of lasagna, all owned and become property of the government. This mouse becomes the property of the government under communism. Whereas with socialism, this mouse is mine. This bowl of lasagna, delicious as it is mine. Individuals can still own their own property, your houses, cars, whatnot. But industrial and production capacity are communally owned and managed by a democratically elected government. Classes still exist in a socialist economy. You can earn more by doing more. But the gaps between the three classes, instead of being about as big as this room, are a little bit more like that. Greatly diminished. And really, isn't that what we all want? We want the middle class to feel more powerful, to feel more, emboldened. Meanwhile, communist economies just say, to hell with it. Let's abolish all classes. Also, the single biggest difference between the two on a societal level, I'm not a religious guy, but we're going to interject religion into this. Freedom of religion is still exercised, allowed, and encouraged in a socialist government. Communist governments don't believe in God and are known to completely abolish the freedom to express religious preference on any level. You're all atheists. So to recap and summarize, socialism allows you to pray to Jesus or Allah, whoever you want. Own your home, own your home or gun, or mouse in my case, and go to work for whoever and wherever you want. Communism does not. Glad we can clear that up. Now, just because I started this segment off, going off after Tucker Carlson and the right, it doesn't mean the left is free and clear. Oh, no. Let me have a chat with you for just a minute. I'm talking to my buds on Twitter, people that are watching this, my good friend Ransom. Let's have a chat. Come here. Donald Trump. Let's talk about Donald Trump. I've stated on this podcast numerous times, I am not a fan of his on any level. He is a lot of things and is capable of a lot of things. He's a totalitarian. We'll agree with that. He's a total asshole. We'll agree with that. He's capable of inhumane things against those of color. We'll agree with that. He's a gaslighter. We'll definitely agree with that. He'd sell this entire country and his own mother to the highest bidder if he felt it would suit his best interests. He'd probably sell his own daughter into prostitution if allowed. The man has no soul and no right to invoke religion into anything he does, even if he's using Jesus as a scapegoat for doing unspeakable things. Like cult leaders. That's what Trump is. He's a cult leader. He's not Hitler. Let's stop with this comparison once and for all. Donald Trump has never been and will never be on the same level of Adolf Hitler. Hitler killed 6 million people simply because he felt it would taint the perfect chosen race. Now, could it have gotten to that point eventually with Trump? Maybe. I can't sit here and say no unequivocally. But putting the two in the same historical context with the evidence that we have at our disposal today is insanely inaccurate. Also, Hitler wouldn't have sold the Reich out to his country's most bitter enemy if he felt it would get him out of his debt. Just saying. But that's not the biggest gripe that I have currently with the left. Since we're talking about Russia, let's talk about this war with Ukraine and Russia. Can we please stop with the doomsday fear-based panic reporting? Please. Vladimir Putin is not going to start World War III. Let's just nip that in the bud right now. He's not going to start launching nukes at the US or Europe without provocation. We went through 30 years of a Cold War without a single missile being launched. We went through the Bay of Pigs, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Iran-Contra debacle, and the entire 80s without a single shot being fired, unless you count the song 99 Red Balloons. We're going to make it through this without descending into nuclear winter. And do you want to know why? Because Putin, for all his faults and all his illogical thoughts and threats, knows that launching even one nuclear missile essentially means the end of civilization as we know it. One gets launched, and then a retaliatory one gets launched. And then just escalates and escalates and escalates and escalates further and further and further. And then you get Iran and India and Pakistan and everybody else in China involved. And yeah, it's a total clusterfuck at that point. I have to think that he doesn't want to be responsible for the death of the human race, even as he's trying to invade a smaller country. Besides, I have a theory. I think Putin is very close to his end anyway. This is his last-ditch effort to expand what he believes in his heart is the great Russian motherland, the great Soviet motherland. He tried getting an in with the US by buying off Trump. That didn't work. He tried buying off the UK, the United Kingdom. That didn't work. I have to think he's doing that because he cares about the state of the country he loves. Everything that he has done in the last 5 years, in the last 10 years, has been to try to restore the greatness of the Soviet motherland. I would assume if he didn't give a shit about Russia or anybody else surviving the nuclear holocaust, he would have just led with the missile launch. Shoot first, ask questions later, that sort of thing. Besides, with how well this Russian invasion is going, he'd probably do something like forget to open the silo doors before launching the missile, and then you have a second Chernobyl on your hands. So yeah, let's stop once and for all with predicting the end of the world coming at the hands of this Russia-Ukraine war. Again, more fear-based panic reporting. Let's stop with that. Thank you. I'm sorry. You thought I was done with Tucker and Friends, right? Did you? Oh, no. I saved the best for last. Perhaps the most egregious example out there of fear-based panic reporting in the news. This goes back to around the time that same-sex marriage was legalized on the national level. First, there was the whole, if we allow gays to marry gays, it will ruin the sanctity of marriage and plunge this society into a modern-day Sodom. If you don't know what Sodom is, ask a religious person. It's basically, try to imagine hell on earth. Yeah, that. Okay, like conservatives having Ashley Madison accounts and cheating on their third wives isn't already doing a fantastic job of ruining the sanctity of marriage and plunging society into a modern-day Sodom. Listen, when you've moved out of that nice glass house up on the hill overlooking the rest of us, like the judgmental, pretentious pricks you are, and then and only then are you allowed to cast stones on the rest of us. Get your own house in order before judging anybody else's. Cool? Okay. Then the immigrants taking your jobs argument. We've talked about this before. Again, based on what? One, automation. We've talked about automation in the past. Is a greater risk of taking people's jobs than an immigrant who can't speak English and has no vocational skills to speak of. Two, your representatives and your senators are the ones that keep giving corporations more and more power to base their operations in the United States while outsourcing their entire workforce overseas. So kind of hard to throw around that whole argument of immigrants taking your jobs when corporations are giving it willfully to those that aren't even here. Three, perhaps the biggest one. Most of the jobs immigrants are taking, quote unquote, are low pay, low skill, and usually reserved for high school students who are looking for a little bit of change to spend but don't really want to work there anyway. So really hard to claim immigrants are taking your jobs when the people that are going after those jobs aren't even putting any effort into them. Then, of course, turning everybody's attention away from masking up and staying indoors and doing right by your neighbors during the height of the pandemic towards being angry and afraid of Asians. Because, Asians are the reason we had to lock down for 8 months in 2020, right? That resulted in the single worst example of race-based hate crimes against Asians in this country since shortly after World War II. All again because we had a president that refused to take any accountability whatsoever. Never forget, Trump was the one that dismantled the pandemic preparedness team a year before COVID hit the United States for the simple, petty fact that Obama was the one that put that team together. That's the only reason that he did that. Lastly, and the entire reason I bring any of this to your attention now, excuse me, is this recent trend involving anger and fear towards trans people, transsexuals. First, there's the argument that if we allow trans people to use the ladies' room, what's to stop a guy from just claiming he's identifying as female and walking in and kidnapping or molesting your little girl? Tugging at the heartstrings a little bit there. My counter argument is twofold. One, what stopped guys from doing that now without having to identify as female? Even at some of the more buttoned up places in America, there is little to no security around restrooms. So anybody can walk in at any time, theoretically. Oh, I didn't know this was the girls' room. I thought it was the men's room. So you want to know what usually stops people from doing this? Common sense. Plus, most restrooms at restaurants and stores have more than one person in it at any one point in time. So the likelihood of getting caught far outweighs the gratification one would get out of it. Second, I would argue that little girls have a greater chance of being molested by their creepy uncle or their mother's creepy boyfriend, or being kidnapped for a sex ring by Senator Matt Gaetz than they do being abducted or molested in the restroom of a McDonald's. Yes, I went there. Can't sue me for libel if you're under investigation. Second argument is if we can just identify as whatever gender we want, we can also identify as whatever race we want or whatever age we want. Again, using the whole trying to drive home the fear every parent has, even me, that their child can be molested or abducted using this logic tactic. And again, it has little to no logic in it whatsoever. You can't just identify as black. You can't just identify as Asian. You need to have that genetic trait in you to be able to do that. Now, I have Mexican in me. I can claim that because I did an ancestry thing. And yes, there is some genetics in there from my dad's side that claim that I am Mexican and Native American. So, win for me. Also, your age is your age. You and I could claim all we want that we're 10 years younger. Hell, I wish I was 10 years younger. But, c'est la vie. That would be such as life for those that aren't aware. Anyway. Just like we can't just identify as an Apache attack helicopter. Finally, the attack on trans people because, and I can't believe we even have to bring this up, men can just identify as women and get into women's sports. For those that can't see the video, I'm facepalming right now. Hard facepalming. Anyway. Listen, I'm sure that a lot of really intelligent people are falling for this trap and taking edge case scenarios and thinking they're happening much more frequently than they really are. This is why I'm bringing this up. All of this. Because again, I'm trying to get you uncomfortable just enough to get you to see that you're being played. 96% of the media you consume in this country, in the United States, whether it's radio, internet, TV, streaming, whatever, newspapers, 96% of it is owned by the richest corporations on the planet, most of whom have shareholders in other countries with ulterior motives. Automatically assume that every podcast, every show, every news network, every Facebook or Twitter profile that is spreading some of these fallacies have an agenda. Hell, just assume this podcast has an agenda, and you'd be right. The agenda of progress. The agenda of not falling for somebody's bullshit. The agenda of trying to save people from their own collective and individual destruction. No one posts a news article or repeats verbiage from a talking head without some kind of hidden agenda behind it. It can be as simple as a personal distrust in a group of people, and we all have it. Regardless of whether you want to admit it or not, it doesn't necessarily make us racist. Let's just put that on the table. Or it could be something more devious than that, like trying to divide and conquer an entire country. It's strictly an American problem because when you read news sources outside the US, it's more fact-based, not as much fear behind it. I actually had to go on to BBC to get any kind of straight story about Russia and Ukraine. As a study recently showed, presenting the news in a way that invokes fear and hatred is far more effective at driving the point home than keeping it logically or fact-based. There's a chemical in our brains that feeds off of fear and hate. And if we don't receive it on a daily basis, it starts causing issues in the brain, like any chemical imbalance would. This is why propaganda is so effective. I don't blame you. I'm not angry at you, and I don't even feel sorry for you. I'm just simply trying to help you understand that this is not okay. And all we have to do on our part is not allow it to fester into our thoughts. And over the last several months, I can tell you, I have let depression and negative thoughts cloud my judgment. So I'm right there with you. I can't sit here and say, oh, I'm so better than you because this and this. No, I get in that position too. I get in that mode as well. So it's just a natural human thing that we get from our ancestors, from our predecessors. Also, can we just, since we're trying to wrap this up here, can we please stop hoarding canned goods and toilet paper? Invest in a bidet. I trust you. Trust me. It's going to change your life. Anyway, the end is not coming. Just chill. Or, take the approach that I do. Live every day to the fullest. So that way, when the end does come, you have no regrets when it's your time. Last thing, this Don't Say Gay bill in Florida is an absolute travesty, and Ron DeSantis should be ashamed. Are you thinking of remodeling a room in your home, but need trustworthy, knowledgeable, experienced people to do the job? Well, I'm here to tell you about Oliver and Marsden LLC. I happen to know one of the owners of this company personally. He's a good guy. They recently did a remodel of my ex's kitchen, and you will not believe how vastly different it looks and feels now. It's like walking into a completely new room. Completely new countertops, new flooring, new lighting. Let me tell you, the lighting in that kitchen desperately needed work done it a long time ago. But they don't just do kitchens. They can do really any room in your house. Or they can even help you model new homes. So if you're looking to level up the value of your home without paying the king's ransom to do it, look up Oliver and Marsden LLC on Facebook. That's Oliver and Marsden LLC. Ask for Tim. Tell him Raul sent you. He'll hook you up proper. So since I recorded the last episode of the podcast, not released the last episode of the podcast, recorded, a lot of changes have happened in the NFL. First, let's address the big elephant in the room. The GOAT is back. Yep, it only took 6 weeks for Tom Brady to do a complete 180 and be like, nope, I'm not done yet. So to answer one of the questions I had in the last episode, what were the Tampa Bay's going to do with the quarterback position? Well, that was what they're going to do. Not one day Not one day after I silently prayed under my breath while recording this podcast that the Seattle Seahawks not trade Russell Wilson. What do? They trade Russell Wilson. Yeah. Not only do they trade one of the most likable quarterbacks in the entire league, they trade him to the one team I was hoping against hope that he'd never go to. The Denver Broncos. But thankfully it wasn't a complete waste, because in return for Russ, the Seahawks did receive the 9th overall pick, among other things. Now, it's not entirely set in stone that they'll use that pick on a quarterback. The Seahawks have needs across the board. Offensive line is a concern, particularly when it comes to run blocking. Defensive line is a concern. And now with the departure of team co-captain Bobby Wagner, the linebacker position is in need of an upgrade. Secondary could always use some more help. Also keep in mind, some of the best quarterbacks in the league didn't even come from the top 10 picks. Aaron Rodgers was the 24th pick of his class. Russell Wilson wasn't selected until the 3rd round. Dak Prescott wasn't selected until the 4th. Tom Brady wasn't selected until the 5th. So some gems can be found in the later rounds. The Seahawks need to approach this with a sense of urgency, because in no universe or timeline should Drew Lock be a starting quarterback for an NFL team, with all due respect. But also approach it strategically. This trade is the closest the league has come to a Herschel Walker type situation since the Saints traded multiple first-round picks for Ricky Williams. Then there's the Washington Commanders. What a lovely mess that team is. Much like the Broncos, they compiled a bunch of assets and draft picks and went all in on a quarterback. Only this time, it was Indianapolis Colts quarterback Carson Wentz. The same Carson Wentz that led the Philadelphia Eagles on an incredible run, only to get injured and watch his backup be the one to deliver them to the Super Bowl. Now, all the knocks against Wentz are valid. The injuries, the completion percentage, the putrid quarterback rating. But in his defense, he threw for less interceptions last year than almost any starting quarterback in the league. So there is that. In an organization that is notorious for having quarterbacks leave a part of their body and soul on the field, having Wentz as the starting quarterback for the Commanders is not good. Oh, and Aaron Rodgers, not only is he staying in Green Bay, he's now the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. Not bad for the reigning back-to-back league MVP. And then there's Deshaun Watson. And you knew I had to get to this guy eventually. Let's put aside, for just a minute if we can, that the guy may or may not have just gotten away with sexual assault 22 times, which brings its own lovely blend of bad PR by itself. The fact that this guy sat an entire year, not because he was injured, but because the Texans suspended him so that he could deal with his legal problems. Until recently, recently, the Texans thanked him for trusting the process by trading him to the Cleveland Browns. In fairness, the situation between Watson and the Texans organization has been less than hospitable for years, going back to the time J.J. Watt left because he felt the team wasn't doing enough to take advantage of Watson's prime years. Side note, can I just say how awesome it is that it appears J.J. freaking Watt has taken to Utah like a fish to water? Yes, he's an Arizona Cardinal for now, but he's spending more time here in the Beehive State than he is in the state he actually plays football in. And it's a beautiful sight to behold. Roaming around Park City in jazz gear, taking in the entire Chuckarama experience. By the way, another side note, and I promise I'll go back on point after this. Cheap buffet places are a crapshoot most of the time, but they hit spot. It really do hit the spot most of the time. Mom, I know what I want for my birthday. I'm going to Chuckarama. Anyway, back on point. The relationship between Watson and the Texans was never going to be repaired. Now this brings up another quarterback question mark, since we're talking about the Browns. Baker Mayfield. And with my luck, by this time tomorrow, Mayfield will have been traded, and I'll have to come back on here and do another addendum. But anyway, speaking of quarterbacks with irreparable relationships with their team, what do the Browns do about Mayfield now that they have Watson? I doubt they bench him, especially since they all but called him a petulant child in the media. There are a lot of options. Indianapolis has an opening. New Orleans could always use another quarterback. Atlanta may or may not be looking to move past the Matt Ryan era. I know we keep talking about that year after year after year, but this could be the year. Carolina is still in the hunt. One team that is seemingly no longer in the hunt for a quarterback is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They went ahead and signed free agent quarterback Mitchell Trubisky. The same Mitchell Trubisky that was selected by the Bears over Deshaun Watson back in the draft. A fact that Trubisky is never going to live down, except now he's going to be that guy, and he's going to be the guy that takes over Ben Roethlisberger. Following a Hall of Fame quarterback, and despite the fact that he's a dirtbag, Roethlisberger is a Hall of Fame quarterback. Following that guy is never an easy thing. Some are able to pull it off. Steve Young, Aaron Rodgers. Most, not so much. Quincy Carter, Brian Greasy. And it's nothing against the guys that follow a legend and fall on their face as a result. They're just put in an impossible situation. To Mitchell Trubisky and whoever starts for the Seahawks next season, all I can say, and I know I've said this the last two episodes, well, it bears repeating. Good luck. A friendly reminder, everybody, that we are no longer doing tech tips at the end of the podcast, but we're reserving those for our soon-to-be launching Patreon. More news on where to find our Patreon will be revealed once we draw closer to launch time. In the meantime, that will do it for this episode of the podcast. Thank you to everybody that has helped make the podcast as enjoyable as it has been. We are on all the major platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. And video episodes of the podcast are up on the Facebook page as well as on YouTube. Link can be found on the description, but they can also be found on theclosingtag.com. One other link that you'll find in the description of the podcast is a donation link. If you'd be so kind as to donate what you can if you can, I'd greatly appreciate it. I know times are tough for a lot of people, especially with gas prices the way they are right now, so I don't expect a great deal. Again, I do this for fun, but your donations are greatly appreciated. Again, thank you so much for watching and for listening, and remember to always include your closing tags.
This has been a Mad Owl presentation.